What is up, Bucs fans? We are back. It's Real Bucs Talk here live on a Tuesday. I can't believe it's already July. We're almost to Buccaneers training camp, believe it or not, only a couple weeks away. The season is going to come on us quick here as time is just flying by. It seems like as years keep on coming by and just going. But I'm joined here by a special guest from Pew Report, and that is Josh Capo. How are we doing, Josh, man? It's good to see you again.
Hey, plus, I'm doing well. It's great to be back on. Very excited for training camp to be, just a couple weeks away now.
Yeah.
And getting back into the football season.
Yeah, absolutely. So everyone joining us here, appreciate you guys coming on in. A lot to discuss. We're going to keep it pretty brief as far as the topics. We're going to mainly talk about, can this Buccaneers offense improve under Liam Coen? And then we'll also touch at the end here on a defensive attribute that I think is going to be very important, or at least the Buccaneers are counting on or hoping for that it takes place. But let's dive right into it. Obviously, Liam Coen, the new Buccaneers offensive coordinator. Josh, what do you feel about him taking over the offense, and what do you think his strengths are going to be for this team coming up?
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of continuity in terms of the concepts and the overarching, what's the word I'm looking for, style of offense working from Dave Canales. So Dave Canales kind of modeled most of his concepts off of Shane Waldron, who he worked under the last couple of years in Seattle. Now, Canales worked under a lot of different offensive coordinators, so he incorporated things from a whole bevy of different styles. But the main basis of it, and Canales had Seasman said it, was that Shane Waldron kind of offense. Now, Waldron worked with Sean McVay in Los Angeles prior to going to Seattle. And that's where Liam Coen most recently was with a couple different stints with LA. And that's really what he models most of his system off of. Mm-hmm. So you've got some continuity, some parallels there. So I think that there is going to be a lot of familiarity for Bucs fans. Mm-hmm. And I think that Coen is uniquely kind of positioned to build off of what Canales started last year. The offense, if you look at certain metrics, traditional metrics, is about the 20th best offense in the NFL. Down the stretch, if you look at some advanced metrics, one of my favorite is EPA per play, so expected points added per play. The Bucs were ranging from like 8th to 12th in the NFL over the last 6 to 8 weeks of the season. So they really came on, and that was with a run game that improved towards the back half of the season, but still wasn't that great. And that's where I think, and you and I have had this conversation, I know you're really, really excited about this. I think that's where Coen can squeeze a little bit more juice out of this offense is in terms of the run game. I think you've got a little bit of improved personnel on the inside, especially at center. I think Cody Mauch in his second year at right guard, you're going to see a huge improvement there. Still worried about left guard. So you got improved play coming from the interior part of the line, combined with Coen, who is very creative when it comes to his run game. We can get more into it. I don't want to just monopolize on this giant soliloquy, but I think that that's where you can build off of a really solid passing game, add in a much more creative and dynamic and improved running game. And I think that the Bucs have an opportunity to be a top 15 offense for the entirety of the year and upside to be top 8 to 10 on a consistent basis, which should be good enough to get them into the playoffs.
Yeah, I think, one of the changes that you spoke on is, with Dave, I think he was more of that 12 personnel as your base. And now with Liam, we're moving more towards this right here, which is 11 personnel, which we're going to see more, often. Obviously, a higher percentage of plays are going to go into 11 personnel. And then you alluded to it with the run game, and I want to point this out here. This was a really good article. If you haven't checked it out, I'll be sure to share it in the description. But by Coach Koo here, does a great job just talking about the importance or the emphasis of duo wrap, which is a run play where they can use it in 11 personnel, 12 or 13. And basically you're having either a receiver or a tight end go in motion to come around and really set your double teams up in that way. So really good. And then also, Bobby Peters, thank you so much for that book. That book is awesome as far as
I thought you'd enjoy that.
yeah, it's so good. He has a book on the Rams offense, and he has others that he just did a manual on the Houston Texans, which is pretty exciting. So, but he's just talking about like here's like a play design here. This is basically your duo wrap where a guy comes in motion, you have the fake sweep going across, but you're basically setting up these double teams here, as you see in the picture, to open up potential alleyways. So that's just one, variation, of the run game that I think we're going to see. Obviously outside zone is going to be incorporated more, mid zone and stuff like that, inside zone that we saw last year, especially towards the back half, like you were talking about, those last, mainly the second half of the season, it got better and improved. So yeah, I'm excited to see what this running game can do, because if it is unlocked, that can really open up, Baker Mayfield in the passing game and really emphasize that play action more often.
Yeah, a few things there that I think you touched on really well is so the first I want to, I know this is a Bucs centric site, so I want Bucs fans to kind of start letting go of the idea of a McVay Shanahan offense as just wide zone or outside zone. Yeah. It was that 5-7 years ago, but the thing that makes those two really two of the best offensive coordinators in the league, and Mike McDaniel as well, is it's not about this is our scheme. Right. It's about how do we evolve to counter the NFL. The NFL got good at defending outside zone and wide zone, a lot of bear fronts, getting guys up on the line of scrimmage, so it didn't allow offensive linemen to kind of attack the second level and create those natural creases. So both McVay and Shanahan, you've actually seen the last couple of years, both have gone much more to a power-heavy running scheme, predicated by a lot of duo. And McVay especially, you're seeing a lot more duo. They just went out and paid a ton of money for 2 guards who really run gap and duo very well, as he gets away kind of from that mid zone. And I think you'll see that with Coen. And Coen is so varied in his run schemes. You alluded to it with Bobby Peters, gap, duo, pin and pull, wrap, all of that. So what you should see, and what made the Lions, you mentioned the Lions, so good last year, was they were so varied in their run game. Yeah. And then building off of it. The interesting thing is when you think about Baker Mayfield as a quarterback, you talked about him being able to build off of that. You think of a guy who's supposed to be really good at play action. And historically over his career, he has been. But last year was his worst year as a play action quarterback of his career. I mean, he was terrible. He was the worst quarterback in the league at play action. And and I know you grind the tape, right? So many of those half boots and naked boots, the backside edge rusher just didn't bite because they didn't believe the Bucs were actually going to run the ball well, or needed that backside player to really crash down from behind on the play. Right. And so you saw Baker rolling out almost into bear hugs from backside outside linebacker, the will linebacker or the edge defender, the defensive end. And it made it very difficult for him to live off of play action. And most of that was based off of that mid zone, inside zone kind of play action. So this year, I think you're going to see a lot more play action based off of duo. You're going to see I think a more effective run game, which will allow for those half boots and those full boots to be more effective and to allow the play action game to hopefully be a little bit better. And I think that'll also unlock Baker as a deep ball thrower, which again, early in his career, phenomenal as a deep ball thrower. Last year, horrid as a deep ball thrower. I think that this will help build upon that. So I think the Coen hire really works well on a lot of different levels. And the biggest one being, I think it's going to help continue to elevate Baker Mayfield, who had a really strong season last year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, let's just look at, what the Bucks weaknesses were last season, especially on offense. Obviously struggled inside the red zone at times, being consistent there. You just mentioned the lack of explosive plays, especially in running the football or throwing the football downfield with a consistent basis. That was definitely a struggle. And then also at times, the interior part of the offensive line was just not good. Like it was hard to, and credit to Dave Canales. I think this is what he did really well, is he found a way to kind of scheme around that
Sure.
and do a good job of kind of mitigating, that weakness per se. But at times it did catch up to them. And it played a part. And, you mentioned before they added, Graham Barton, I think is going to be a big part of that. And we'll see what happens with the left guard spot. Hopefully someone can be at least average there or solid, good enough. But, just looking at those weaknesses, I mean, I think Cohen's ability to not only adjust in game, but also his sequencing of play calling, his experience there, and really being able to build that ground attack that we saw at Kentucky. Granted, college football, it's obviously a step up, but just his way of showing that on tape and having a good background to go off of, you got to be at least intrigued as far as what he's going to bring to the table.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, I mean, really what I would say probably got him this hire or got him this job is going back to working with Will Levis, right? Yeah. Will Levis had his best season at Kentucky the year that he was paired with Coen. And I mean, they had a phenomenal season together, and that was the backing of really what got him drafted as high as he did. And, probably should have been a first rounder, but that year after Coen left to go back to the Rams was abysmal in a few different ways. Levis regressed. I think a lot of that had to do with the offensive coordinator he was paired with, but then the offensive line was also just a train wreck and made it very difficult. But there are a lot of similarities between Will Levis and Baker Mayfield, right? Big armed quarterbacks. They like to push the ball down the field.
Right.
So I think that could work really well for Baker, is being paired with Coen. They had a small pairing, right, in 22 when Baker was traded late in the season to the Rams. Didn't really have an opportunity to have a full off season or even a full season. So I kind of discount that a little bit, but there's at least a base level of relationship there. So out of all of the possibilities, I think Coen was a brilliant hire and one that I didn't see coming, and really, it made a ton of sense after the fact, right?
Yeah.
So I think that there's a lot of optimism. Does it mean that things are going to be perfect? No. Do I think that this is going to be a top 5 offense in the NFL? There are some really good offenses out there with better quarterbacks. Not that I like Baker. I just, there are better quarterbacks, but it certainly should allow the Bucs to have a good enough offense that, if paired with what I think the defense can be, should be right there for the top of the NFC South. I'm high on the Falcons. I know most Bucs fans hate hearing that, but I think that should allow for a dogfight at the top of the NFC South.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and also I forgot to mention this, but third downs. I mean, a lot of third downs last year, and the Buccaneers were actually really good at converting said third downs. I mean, they were over 40%, which is, not bad. I don't know what the league average was, but being over 40%, that has to be, a pretty good number for an offense. But again, it puts you in that situation when you get inside the red zone, and then you set yourself up again for third down, and it becomes tighter areas. And that's where there was too many field goal kicking or not converting inside the money area. So I think that's where, if they can unlock this ground attack and be a little bit more efficient there, that's going to help you, put up more points. And that's the name of the game. I think that's where you're hoping Liam Coen can take this team to the next step. And that's averaging closer to, 24 points per game, or maybe even 25 or somewhere around that range. I think that's, if they can hit that number, you have to feel confident about a Todd Bowles defense. And again, we'll get to the defense at the end of the show, but you just have to feel confident that the offense complementing the defense much better than it did last year. That has to bode well for your team, being more consistent and winning more games. But yeah, I mean, just looking at it from that standpoint, I'm really excited, for the hire and, his ability to really scheme and draw things up, marrying the run in the past. We've heard that before. We heard it last year with Dave Canales, but I think Liam just being more experienced and understanding, and also want to dive into some of the staff that he's brought in. I think some of the guys that he brought over are going to be an improvement in my opinion, especially like Josh Gizzard from Miami. I think that's a huge addition. Just getting the more variations that you can get from a Miami offense and add that and incorporate, into your personnel here with the guys that we have. And another big thing that hasn't been mentioned also is just, I think this is Liam Coen's like best personnel that he's had in his time as far as offense play caller. And obviously that makes sense because it's college versus NFL, but just, even the Rams, when he was the OC at the Rams, didn't really have much to work with, with the injuries and all that stuff happening during that season.
Yeah, I would agree with a lot of that. And I think just kind of going back to a couple of points you made there.
Yeah.
Hold on 1 second. Sorry.
No, you're fine.
I apologize for that one. Thank you.
You're good.
Yeah, staying out of third down, which was something that Canales struggled with last year. And a lot of that comes down to the play sequencing, which I bemoaned throughout almost the entire season. The Bucs were bottom 6 in neutral situation pass, first down passing, which I saw something from a guy named Tej Seth, who's amazing at data analytics. The most common results of a run play, and it's like overwhelming, are 2, 3, and 4 yards. Like those 3 outcomes make up something like 80% of all run plays are going to net you 2, 3, or 4 yards. It's ridiculous, right? So why would you choose to waste the down you have every option available to you on a play that's most likely going to get you 2 to 4 yards, right? And I'm hopeful that Coen will have a little bit more of an aggressive first down approach. If he doesn't, I think at that point we can succinctly and convincingly say that Todd Bowles has a mandate for his offensive coordinators. You will run on first down a good amount of time, right? And that put the Bucs in a lot of those third downs. I want to say they were top 3, like they had the 3rd highest number of third downs in the NFL last year. And yet they were at 41% conversion, which was 9th overall, but the league average was 38. So it's a small spread between league average and where they were. They were above league average, which is good. But imagine if you just avoid third down altogether, right? Just win on first and second down. You don't have to worry about it. So, but I think that you've got a really great point there in terms of the coaching staff. Gizzard, I think, was a great addition. I'm also excited about Carberry, the offensive line coach. I think that he's done a lot with not phenomenal talent in New Orleans recently, and they were able to kind of keep that line better than I think the talent would suggest. So I think that you've got, I think that the Bucs coaching staff needed kind of a shakeup, and it's nice to see some of that happening. So all in all, I think it's encouraging. But the big thing I'll say is keep in mind, Liam Coen has only called plays at the NFL level for 1 game. Right? He does have 2 years of experience calling plays at the college level. It is a little bit of a different beast. So there are going to be those growing pains like Canales had last year, hopefully on a bit more of a truncated learning curve. But there's still going to be those growing pains. You just hope that he's open to adjusting and learning quickly. I think that was one of Dave Canales' best traits last year, was in most areas you saw exponential growth in a short amount of time. And that allowed them to be much more successful in the back half of the year, outside of the week 18 Carolina game.
No, you're spot on there. I think that's going to be especially what we're looking for early on. How quickly can he make those adjustments? Especially as you you've alluded to that, yeah, there's going to be some growing pains, and hopefully his strategy or play call style is aggressive, like we hope. Especially just using, I bring this back up, but just more 11 personnel. I know a lot of the coaching staff has talked about pre-snap motion, shifts, all those things being more involved this season. So I'm hoping that's the case, because that is something that I think as an offense in today's NFL, it's pretty much paramount. Like, you need to have it, at least some of it, called, consistently. You can't just like completely abandon it, like Byron Leftwich did in 22, where there was no movement whatsoever. And I think that's just, you got to have that, especially in your rushing offense. Like, that has to be a huge factor, because defenses are just too good to, sit back and understand, okay, this is where the play's going. And they'll be there, prepared for it. So I think you have to get these guys moving east and west to create, said alleyways.
Yeah. That's an interesting point. I have a theory that because early in the season last year, the Bucs actually used a lot of motion, and it dried up as you moved later into the season. And I think that may have been at the behest or to help improve Baker Mayfield's abilities. I think that Mayfield, not nearly on the level of like a Dak Prescott, but I think that one of his biggest strengths is pre-snap, when everything's kind of set and static. He's able to really kind of understand kind of the defense, and it helps him with his pre-snap processing. And I think that the motion, maybe it may have actually hindered that a little bit. And so I think that the Bucs kind of, as the season progressed, reduced the amount of motion to help improve Baker's net results. So it'll be interesting to see that this year, because in general, I'm a fan of motion in the offense, because I think there's this kind of thought process that if you send a guy in motion, you can immediately tell it's going to be man versus zone. And that's not necessarily the case, especially in a modern NFL. Defenses are getting a lot better at zone match.
Yeah.
Well, there's so much zone match these days, right? So that it's all kind of a hybrid. So, but in general, I like the idea of the motion. The other thing that I'm hopeful for is with Chris Godwin moving back into the slot, I think that it is going to leverage one of his best skills, which is just his spatial awareness and his intelligence. Because another staple of a Liam Coen offense is going to be the option route. And it's mainly from the slot receiver. That's what's made Cooper Kupp so good over these last few years, is he's just the master of the option route. And I think you're going to see Godwin running a lot of those option routes. And I think that is going to unlock whatever's left with him. I do think that there's some diminished athleticism there, and there's, what is his ceiling? But I also think that that's going to help him in the red zone, because the Bucs didn't know what to do with Godwin in the red zone last year. It's part of the reason why I think he had 2 touchdowns, I think, for the whole season. He was misused in the red zone. And I think putting him in the slot, putting him on those option routes. If you're a fantasy football player, I would buy low on Chris Godwin in terms of touchdowns.
Yeah, absolutely. While we're speaking on receivers real quick, I mean, let's just kind of highlight, I know there's, you have the X, the Y, and the Y is the tight end, but you have the F, which is going to be likely Chris Godwin, and then the Z as well. Just kind of go over how we're going to see our receivers play those spots. I mean, obviously Mike will probably be the X. Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So based on the graphic you have here, most likely Mike Evans would be, trying to see if they're lined up a little bit offset. Looks like they might not be. He would most likely be the receiver on the tight end side, right? Okay. And a lot of times what you would see is the X. So this is a 2x2 formation. You have 2 receiving options to the left, 2 to the right. A lot of times the X comes into play when you're in a 3x1, and he's the one off on his own. The idea
over here.
The idea being that the X receiver, he's typically big and strong and lot of times fast. You don't have to be necessarily fast, but he's up on the line of scrimmage, so he's going to get jammed the most with press coverage. Doesn't mean it happens all the time, but he has that ability to win one-on-one against a jam, against a press, and he can kind of win at all three levels of the field, but especially intermediate and deep. Then on the left side, the Z would be the outside receiver. So again, he's going to get pressed a decent amount. But there are ways he's not technically right up on the line of scrimmage. He can be a little bit off, and it allows him to kind of move off of press coverage a little bit easier. And then the F is your slot receiver. He's the guy inside, and you can see on the graphic, the slot receiver is behind, positioned a couple yards off the line of scrimmage, which makes it much more difficult for any corner who's lined up against him to press him. And that's because with that much space, he can create avenues to just avoid the jam altogether. So that's kind of the three different positions. So Mike Evans is 100% an X receiver, right? And that's where you want him because he is big and physical, and there are no corners in this league, maybe one or two, who are big enough to match him in just size and brute strength, right? Godwin last year, and even in like 2019, he would play a lot of Z, especially in 12 personnel, which is two tight ends, right? Two receivers, two tight ends. But he's moving to the F, which is that slot receiver. Then beyond the two of them, it gets really interesting because last year, Trey Palmer was the F receiver. He was the slot, right? And Jalen McMillan, for most of his career at Washington, played slot. He played the F, right? So you don't have technically somebody who has one as a Z receiver at the NFL level on the roster at this time, right? Outside of Godwin, we know is moving inside. And again, in 12 personnel, you'll see Godwin as the Z. So I loved Palmer as an F receiver last year in the Canales offense because they used him so well as a deep threat from the slot, and he was oftentimes running these go routes where he's just directly running right at a single, at either the single high safety when it was middle of the field closed, or he would run at one of the two top safeties when they were in a defense was in a too high shell. I think he can be a good Z. I don't think he's the crispest route runner, but I love his ability to take the top off of defense. He is legit 4.3 speed. You see some guys, they run 4.3s, and then we watch the tape and you're like, where is it? Right? Like they put on the pads and they slow down like 0.2 of a second, right?
Yeah,
Trey
it's coming
Palmer
along here. Yeah.
He's a legit 4.3 guy, and I think that gives the offense some interesting things. Jalen McMillan, again, he played a lot of slot, and I think the Bucs want him as a Z. I worry about his play strength in either role. I wasn't as high on McMillan as a lot of other people were. I think he wins well in the intermediate to deep part of the field,
right?
But I worry about his ability to get there in time with the offense unless he improves his play strength. So that'll be something that I'm looking for in training camp. How well is he playing in a physical role, able to get off those presses and those jams? If he's going to be on the outside, he's got to learn how to do that and win that way. If he can, I think he'll be a good receiver. If not, I still think Palmer's the guy. And, personally, I would say at this moment in time, I'd want Trey Palmer as that Z with McMillan developing for a year.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It also, it makes you wonder, if there is a role for Sterling Shepard, obviously that, remains to be seen how much they're gonna, if he's even going to make the roster, obviously, because they have other receivers that they like, Raheem Jarrett, Cameron Johnson is a guy that I like. I think he can be a sleeper to look out for. But you mentioned it. I mean, there's not much experience from an outside receiver standpoint other than Mike and Chris Godwin. So hope those guys stay healthy. Please stay healthy. But yeah, just, getting back to the offense, and we'll wrap it up here, and then we'll go into the defense real quick, and that will be it for us here tonight. But yeah, I mean, with Liam, I think overall main strengths, he's going to really amp up this ground attack. And I have a video tomorrow just talking about the running back room. I think Rashad White is a good fit for this offense, and I think Bucky Irving, I like his ability to get up north and south real quick. So I think he makes a lot of sense, being utilized in that way. So yeah, the strengths, run game, I think improving is going to be a big factor. And then also just overall play sequencing and hopefully having a aggressive approach, like you said, on first down, where we can avoid some of these, third and long situations that became very consistent throughout the year. And obviously they improved one of their biggest personnel weaknesses, which was, I think, center from last year. And that, I think, being upgraded with Grant Barton, who looks like he's going to be the starting center. I think that's the way to go. So, I mean, just your overall thoughts to sum it up as far as Liam Coen goes.
Yeah, I think it's a high upside hire. I think there are lots of things to like and to be excited about. Again, with a lack of actual play calling at the NFL level, there's only so much you can be, excited about or take for granted, take to that bank, if you will. But there's certainly a lot of indicators that he can be very successful in this role with this roster, with this talent level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So with that said, I think we're looking for this Buccaneers offense to improve, and the big thing that we said is the ground game. So hopefully that does take place. But real quick, I want to jump over to the defense, and I want to talk about just a thought that I've been having, and I think the Buccaneers are really counting on it. And, me and you, Josh, we've talked about this before, especially with the edge rush or the lack of edge rusher, especially a top tier edge rusher. That's been something that, the Buccaneers, I think, have been trying to go after. Maybe not so much, the high free agent or the high price free agent, but they're trying to address it. Obviously with JTS, you drafted Logan Hall, you drafted Kalijah Kancey, Chris Braswell, Yaya Diaby over the last couple of years. So my main question to you is, I think, this is a statement, but I think they are really hoping for internal growth to take them to that next level. And I just want to get your thoughts on the younger prospects of this team. And maybe even like Marquise Watts. Like, I'm really excited to see what his game is now going into year two. And Yaya Diaby, Kalijah Kancey, they're counting on these guys to really take steps forward so that even without, that top pass rusher, they can be better at rushing the quarterback as a whole.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm looking at the depth chart you've got posted there, and I think intrinsically I knew this, but it just dawned on me. Look at that starting lineup. There's not a single external free agent.
Right. Exactly.
Every single player is a Bucs draft pick, or in the case of Chris Izzian, an undrafted free agent. But as far as the outside linebacker room, I used to, long time ago, I used to work, I was a merchant marine. I used to work on the water, and we used to have a thing, because they try and teach you different knots that you're supposed to know how to tie, like the bowline is the king of knots and whatnot. Yeah. But I used to have this guy who would tell me, well, if you can't tie a knot, tie a lot, right? And I think that the Bucs have kind of taken that approach when it comes to their outside linebacker room. They continually throw darts until they're hoping to hit on one, right? And I know a lot of Bucs fans are really excited about Yaya Diaby. He had a couple of he led the team in sacks last year, right? And everybody's excited about that. I'm a little bit more apprehensive because the play-to-play ability to win one-on-one was much more inconsistent than what you would like out of a starter. I'll just go ahead and let everybody flame me again. JTS, which is a much better one-on-one pass rusher than Yaya Diaby was last year, right? But I am high on Chris Braswell. The more I watch Braswell, I think that I think there's something there. And I think that it can be developed. And I think that there's a high floor with this defense, which when I'm looking at offenses, I want high upside, but when I'm looking at defense, I want high floor because defense in general just tends to be a much more variance side of the ball, high variance side of the ball. So I want to eliminate as much low on the variance as I can with defense. And I think the Bucs have done that. And you look at the depth that they've created at almost every position group outside of interior defensive line where they're a little thin there. But everywhere else, I really think that they've got strong depth at all three levels. And then you do have difference makers at all three levels, right? You got Vita and Kalijah Cansey at the front. You've got Lavonte David, who's still playing at an extremely high level, top 5 linebacker in the NFL, in my opinion, last year. And then you got Antoine Winfield Jr. on the back end, and Jamel Dean had a bad by his standards year last year, still better than league average. Zion McCollum, a lot of people don't realize this. Zion McCollum was probably a league average starting corner last year with a lot of upside. I'm super high on him. So I think there's your growth, right? I don't know if you can get much better than Antoine Winfield Jr. was last year, but you can hope for at least him to maintain that level of play. But between Zion McCollum, I think Tyke Smith's going to win the nickel job, and I think that improve the level of play that Izzy gave them last year. I think overall the edge room is going to be a little bit better than it was last year. Love Shaq Barrett. He's an amazing human being. There was definitely some fall off, and I think that they can replicate him in the aggregate with Braswell, with an improvement from Diaby. And I still think JTS has got another level in him, or another gear in him. And then linebacker, I think, is really, really interesting because KJ Britt provided a higher floor than Devin White did. But I like some of the upside of the guys behind him, some unheralded guys, and Kalen DeLoach out of Florida State, undrafted free agent. I like JJ Russell. I just wrote about him in our Pewter Report roundtable this morning. And he's kind of a sleeper that I'm looking for. And then Servassier Dennis. Dennis is similar athletic profile to Devin White. Definitely blitzes very, very well, which Todd Bowles loves out of that position. And I think if he can put a little bit together in terms of pass coverage, he could be your heir apparent to Lavonte David. Not necessarily at Lavonte's level, but at least that transition into a solid starter.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree with what you said there. I look at a couple players, I think Kalijah Cansey just taking that next step, and I had a video on him, earlier this week or last weekend, but him taking that next step towards a star player, which I think he has the upside to do, and really take off this year. If he can ascend to that level, I think it makes your defense go to, somewhere they haven't been, or at least haven't been over the last couple of years with Todd Bowles. They get into that next tier because now with your additions that you made in the secondary, with Jordan Whitehead coming back, you have an eraser back there that can help out with the inconsistencies that Devin White was, because he would miss plays, but Jordan Whitehead was there to back him up and make the play, or it'd be Winfield, making the play. So I think you have a better safety room now. The corners, I think, are more solid overall. So I feel like if Cansey, and again, my sleepers, Marquise Watts, like that's my guy. I think if
you and Scott Reynolds both,
he's got a chance. I really do. I think he's got a chance to enter that starting conversation. I really do. I think he can be the opposite starter next to Yaya, or however they want to play it out. I still believe in JTS as well. I think let the dude rush. If they let him rush, he can make things happen. But they have him doing so many different roles, like he's doing, so many joker roles, whether he's out in coverage.
Best coverage edge in the NFL.
He is.
I don't know if that's going to get him paid at all, but it's something he can hang his hat on.
No, I mean, next offseason, he's going to get he's probably going to get an $8 to $10 million deal, and he's probably going to put up pretty solid numbers wherever he goes, because they'll let him just be that traditional, get after the quarterback type of player.
Yeah.
I can definitely see that. So Yeah, I'm excited. I feel like the defense they've improved their weaknesses, which last year I thought was Devin White spot linebacker. They improved that, I think, as a committee. And then the safety role with Jordan Whitehead coming in definitely improves your back end. And Zion McCollum, Kalijah Cansey, all these guys that are entering year 2 as starters, they're going to sky through the roof. I think is potential as far as just being better overall and being more consistent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I agree with you wholeheartedly on safety. I think that 100% that room's upgraded. I agree wholeheartedly on the interior of the defensive line because I think I wrote about it recently. Like I predict Kalijah Cansey's going to have like an 11.5% pressure rate this year, which is you're getting into the upper tiers of interior defensive linemen if you can get into the double digits. Like I said, I think the edge room is probably a push with the potential to be a lot better. You said corner was definitely better, and I think I'll push back on that one because
well,
Carlton
Bryce
Davis
Hall, I like Bryce Hall too.
Yeah, but if you take the reality of what last year was with Zion playing well as the 3, now you put him in as the 2, and there's still uncertainty, right? Because that is a small sample size for him. With Bryce Hall, I still think Dean, Davis, Zion last year is probably a safer bet for performance than the 50th percentile projection for Dean, Zion, Bryce Hall. Yeah. But I think to your point, again, there's a lot of upside there. Yeah. But I don't know if I would just wholeheartedly say it's definitely better in terms of 50th percentile outcomes. But I think that the 75th percentile outcome would be better than what last year's room was. And I would personally take the bet that they'll get there. But I don't know if I could definitively say the corner room is better. And then the linebacker room, I think, again, the floor is higher with KJ Britt now entrenched as the starter.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I wouldn't say the corner room is definitely better. I was more hinting as the overall defense, I think, is better overall because you're improving.
The depth is awesome.
Yeah, because you're improving that safety room with Whitehead's performance. And then obviously middle linebacker, I think, will be more consistent overall. Maybe not the splashiness that you had at times with Devin White, but it's just more consistent, more higher floor, like you said. And I just feel like the upside for Kalijah Cansey, and if Vita Vea is dominant like he wants to be with this new, found, weight and all this, being in shape and can play more, I think that unlocks even more. And I expect Kalijah Cansey to be one of those guys that's going to constantly get double teamed at some point. And then Vita Vea is going to be open. That can help out, these guys on the outside. So that's what I'm looking for. I think that will be a big factor heading into this season.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I'll give one last kind of thought on that. Just because you brought up Vita. Last year was the first year of his career, I think, since his rookie year where his pressure rate was under 10%.
Yeah.
He's an interesting one to watch. I've kind of got like a little star next to his name in my preseason planning because he's real close to 30.
Yeah.
And with his frame, I don't know if that ages really well, at least in terms of his ability to rush the passer, which is all the more important for him getting into this best shape of his life. Now you hear that storyline every year, right? And does it usually pan out? Not usually, but if he can take off some of that bad weight, I think it could extend his, the peak part of his career. But also the Bucs have to start preparing for a life post Vita. They aren't moving as much of his contract around, creating more negative space next year or in future years. He's getting closer to 30. And then they really need to start figuring out what are we going to do on the interior part of the line in a post Vita at his peak kind of world. Can't see step 1, but they need more steps. Obviously, you can't do everything all in one off season. So I'm not saying that Vita is going to decline, but I am saying that it would not shock me if you last season was actually the first of Vita's decline. Yeah. So it wouldn't shock me.
Nope. I'm in agreement there, and I'll say it. If we get anything from Logan Hall, the defense will be unstoppable. It will be unstoppable. If Logan Hall becomes a player, look out.
We got to get him on your channel.
Oh man, I would love to have him on the channel. I'd love to have an interview with him. But yeah, fun times. That's a little inside joke on our Twitter chat. Appreciate everyone joining us. That's going to do it for us here tonight. Josh Capo from Pure Report, always a pleasure. Be sure to hit that like button. Comment down below your thoughts of Liam Coen. What do you feel about this run game? How is it going to improve? Or do you think it's not going to improve? Let us know. But it was always a great time talking Bucs football with you, Josh, and we'll have to have you on again here in the upcoming weeks for sure.
I look forward to it. Plus, thanks for having me.
All right, man. All right, guys, that will do it, and we'll see you on the next one.